when we got here, obviously, it was a place that many hunters came, and it had been, like, say, overhunted. So you wouldn't see deer. The big cats were gone. The all the basically you didn't see much nature, and we started installing camera traps. We're in a way of witnessing what's going on, and through the years, definitely now, with the database that we have, it's unbelievable the number of individuals of spectacled bear, of puma, of ocelot, of the oncilla, of deer. I mean, it's incredible the amount of fauna that we are now witnessing. So it's very easy with the camera traps to know that you are definitely bringing back the animals.
Nature Solutionaries is a podcast about conservationists who do amazing things for nature and bring inspiration into our lives. Today, I'm talking to Stuart, Pimm, and Luis Mazariegos about their wonderful and successful conservation project in Western Andes cloud forest, Colombia, one of the most biodiverse spots on the planet. Together, their organizations Saving Nature and the Hummingbird Conservancy are purchasing small plots of degraded land and intact forest and reconnecting them to a 100,000 hectares of rainforest, with the aim of creating a land corridor for wildlife. Stuart is a world leader in the study of present-day extinctions, and he's currently Professor of Conservation Ecology at Duke University. Luis is a virologist and businessman based in Colombia, whose big passion are hummingbirds. He has probably photographed more hummingbirds than anyone else in the world. I have always thought that the Amazonian rainforest was the most biodiverse place on the planet, but while preparing for this interview, I found out that I was wrong, and in fact, much richer are the coastal rainforests of Brazil and Andes. So why does everyone only talk about the Amazon rainforest?
I think there's two kinds of biodiversity. One is just a simple number of how many species you can find in a particular place. And for that, the Amazon can claim to be number one. But there's another way of looking at that, and that is to talk about how special the species are. By special, I mean how local they are, how restricted they are to particular places. Technically, how endemic they are. And for that, the northern Andes, the coastal forests of Brazil, Madagascar, a few other critical places around the world are exceptionally important because the species that are found there are found nowhere else on the planet. So technically, they have the highest concentrations of endemic species.
So today we are going to talk about Colombia and the beauty and the richness of its nature. So can you explain to the listeners why the Western Andes cloud forest is so unique?
It has this exceptional number of species that are found nowhere else on the planet. Exceptional numbers of bird species, amphibians, butterflies, orchids. A very, very high fraction of the world's orchids are found in Colombia. So there's a lot of very special, unique, wonderful species of just about everything in the Western Andes of Colombia.
But still, Western Andes have lost about 75% of its forest due to logging, agricultural expansion, mining, and oil extraction. And now we are beginning to witness the additional damaging impacts of climate change. One of the problems in this area is the fragmentation. I read in one of the interviews, it's quite an anecdote that the animals can't find a date on a Saturday night. So one way to prevent extinction is to create these corridors so that the animals can find a date and they can meet. So you're buying plots of land and stitching them together. So what kind of corridor are you building in La Messenia?
So we know a great deal about what happens to populations when they become small. You're right that the individuals have trouble finding a date. And there's lots of experience about what happens when you can't find the right date. I mean, within Europe, you had the Habsburgs, who proceeded to decide that they couldn't marry anybody who wasn't a Habsburg, and they became inbred until they became infertile. And, we don't need to go into the details of European history and what happened next. Well, it's the same thing with other species, that if there's only a few individuals, they're likely to be related to them, they become inbred and they die out. So a very important thing we must do for isolated populations is to give them the chance to meet each other. And that means reforesting areas that have been deforested. And in the Western Andes, and indeed in many other parts of the world, habitat remains, but it's in patches that are too small to maintain viable populations of the animals and plants that live there. So what we can do is to acquire land strategically, let the forest come back on its own if we can, and if we can't do that, to plant native trees to establish habitat corridors. It's a risky thing for a species to try to get from one patch of forest across a cattle pasture to another. There may be predators in hunting in the open areas, so we need to give them cover. So planting trees, reforesting the areas, reconnecting the landscape is a very cost-effective way of protecting species in many of the parts of the world where endangered species concentrate.
And do you think that this is a common trend? Like, do many NGOs do this?
No.
Exactly, because this is the first time that I'm talking to someone who's doing this, Like, I haven't heard about this so much.
One of the things that we wanted to do two things at Saving Nature. One of them was to put conservation back into the hands of local groups. We want to empower people like Luis and his team at Fundación Colibri. I have no great desire to be the head of a large conservation organization inside the Washington, D.C. Beltway. I think conservation is done by effective local conservation groups. But the other aspect is I want to use the very best conservation science. I wanted to bring the science that my colleagues and I have developed in this very new scientific field and use that science to be effective in what we do. I don't desire to say, look, I have protected 1 million square kilometers, because frankly, people who claim that are protecting areas that in fact are already protected. What I want to do is to use a laser focus to say, this is where we can act to have the greatest impact for the least cost. So I want to bring science into this process so that we can be so much more effective, so we can do so much more with the limited resources that we have.
Well, that sounds like very smart conservation. Not just protecting any species because you like it, but because it's effective. I wonder, how did the two of you meet, and how did you start a partnership? Luis, can you tell us?
Well, around 2006, when I was hired by National Geographic to do a story on hummingbirds, I I then, after I had done all the traveling and everything, and they gave me some money, I decided to create the Hummingbird Conservancy. And this also coincided with me talking to Jorge Orejuela, which was sort of my mentor in the 80s because he had created a natural reserve in southern Colombia. And, I considered him that he had given me very important information. So I contacted him again. And very little time passed when he told me, hey, Luis, we were trying to create a reserve here, and my very good friend Stuart Pimm was giving us some funds, but I don't think we're going to be able to use them. And we would like for you to get involved, and I want you to meet Stuart. So Jorge was basically the person that got us together because Jorge had actually been a roommate with Stuart while they were doing their doctorate, and so that's when we met. And Stuart came to Colombia, and we started this project that really has been wonderful. I mean, I think that we were like the perfect fit, and we're in an area that absolutely needs to be conserved. I mean, the biodiversity here is unbelievable. I mean, there's many factors that actually uh, one could say, why is this place so biodiverse? And it's because of its geology, its climate, just certain factors, that the Choco jet stream that hits this area during certain times of the year that makes it, highly, the cloud forest, have extremely high humidity. That apparently has to do a lot with the biodiversity. And so again, we are in this sort of perfect match between the two organizations that I think is gonna show that amazing results.
So the two of you met in 2008, am I right?
Yes, and the timing was fortuitous for me because I had just been honored by being the 2006 laureate from the Royal Netherlands Academy of Arts and Sciences, the world's premier environmental award for environmental science, and I very much wanted to make sure that I used that prize money to effect science-driven conservation.
I love this about both of you, that you were given money and you didn't use it for, I don't know, buying a new car or investing into some property or I don't know, anything else, but you just put that money to create an organization, and because that's what both of you did. So I really admire this. In 2008, you started buying the land, small plots of land, and now as of 2021, you have roughly 3,500 hectares. And I'm wondering, Luis, is it easy to buy land in this area?
This area had lived through a period of high conflict. So the first, um, let's say, land, or what they call here finca, because it was actually a cattle ranch, the owners had been kidnapped by the guerrillas. So they did not want to return to the area. They had actually told the people from La Mesenia that they would give away that land to them if they would just take it. And nobody really had I would say, an outlook for the future. So when I met Gustavo Suarez, which is the person that brought me here, and originally because I was wanting to photograph this special hummingbird, and he told me, look, Luis, there's an area that would be wonderful for a nature reserve. I have the bird inventories. Then I contacted the owners, and they gave us the land, and they allowed us to have 2 years to purchase it. But price wise, to me, it was low price. And from there on, people started offering pieces of land because of the same reasons. And they were not very expensive. Through time, Hardin, the town of Hardin, became very popular because of a soap opera. The Witch was the name. And so it attracted a lot of actors, it attracted a lot of people, a lot of attention, and land prices begun to raise or rise. And also, it actually has become a place where lots of Europeans have come to retire and others to live. And so land prices began increasing. And so let's say that we still keep on getting offers to buy land or to acquire land, but it obviously increased in price. What is also the benefit in a way is the exchange rate, be it with the euro or the dollar, obviously has been rising. The peso has been devaluating. So if you look at it in terms in that respect, let's say dollar wise or euro wise, actually the land is not much more or significantly more expensive than it was 10 years ago.
Was it only degraded land or also intact forest?
Yeah, we bought both things. We have access. Let's say that the land we bought both has degraded forest or pasture land, and then some had little secondary, and others not. I won't call it primary. Some areas do have primary forest. The ones that we maybe have bought more recently, but the first farm or the first plot was actually mainly pasture land, and it was actually a place where they would fatten the cattle before they sold it. And now when you look at it, which is funny, is like people that know this area say, "Oh my God, that farm is lost." The farm is lost is because it's now covered extensively with forest, with secondary forest. The fauna is coming back. You can now see puma very close to the cabin. We have a camera behind my this cabin, and we get to see the oncilla or the leopardus tigrinus, which is an endangered cat. We have deer and spectacled bears. So we have 24 camera traps that actually tell us how the fauna is coming back, how the species are coming back, how the birds that were considered rare are common. So in our garden, we have the nest of the red-bellied grackle, which is an endangered species. And now I'm not gonna. I mean, I'll call it like is sort of almost a not a pest, but I'm saying it's so abundant now that it's amazing. I mean, so it's nesting in the garden constantly. So it is wonderful. It's wonderful to see species coming back. Birds that you wouldn't see 10 years ago are now around. Every morning at 5:30, you get a concert of birds singing. So it's really it sort of fills your heart because it you know that you're doing the right thing because you see the results and people around it. I mean, my park rangers, one of them used to be the guy that hunted the most fauna, like Don Uriel, and and he's just amazed. And he's now I mean, the guy that advocates the most to protect, the forest.
The first time I went up the valley with Louise and Jorge, there was the field station where Louise is now, and it was just sitting in the middle of this huge cattle pasture.
And that was in 2012?
Yeah, 2000, I think it was before that, wasn't it, Louise?
Yes.
Maybe 2012, whenever. But it was in the middle of a big cattle pasture. Now, when you go up, you're walking through forest, and you're on top of the field station before you find it. And when you have experiences like that, you know you're doing the right thing. You're bringing nature back. It's enormously exhilarating to know that we can make a difference. We can turn this battle around and begin to save nature.
And how did you select the plots of land that you bought?
Well, let's say that if we wanted, I mean, when you recognize, let's say through in now like Google Earth, that you're able to see a satellite picture of the land, and you sort of want to say, okay, we need to sort of make this corridor to have this parts where there's a lot of pastures and rebuild all those corridors. And then you start selecting, and we have the information, get the cadastre, that tells you who owns what. So we go and look at all the plots, and then we start saying, okay, this plot is of interest, this plot of interest, and we start sending message because everybody around here knows everybody. It's amazing. I mean, when you talk to people, it's like, oh, in some way or another, everybody is related. It's incredible. And so you can send a message to someone and say, hey, are you interested in selling your land? Some people may say, no, I'm not. But then 2-3 years later, they will come back and say, okay, yeah, now I'm ready. We want to consider selling our land. And the reason for that is that obviously people grow in age, and maybe they have had kids, and some kids do not want to remain in the fields. We, in a way, we're trying to turn that back, saying to the kids, the young kids, look, there is an opportunity here. We do not want to get people out of here. We want them to remain here, especially the young kids. And so that's one of the reasons why we started doing a lot of things with the school. And that's why one of the reasons where we sometimes tell somebody, okay, we'll buy these areas and allow you to remain there if you want. If you don't, okay, fine. But we are not into this thing of buying land and kicking people out, because we definitely want people to stay and have a sustainable future through this type of conservation. Be it as it may, that then in the end, like here we hire park rangers, we hire cooks, we hire guides for everyday work. We mean, like today we have, now that we're planting trees, we have to hire more help. And so we want to show them that that is allowing them to have a better income and a better way of living also.
At Saving Nature, we do two kinds of mapping. The first is what we call the strategic mapping, which identifies places at a broad geographical scale. The Western Andes and this particular region of the Western Andes stand out as being, exceptionally important. But then we also do what we call tactical mapping, where we use a lot of remote sensing, satellite imagery. We look at how the forest cover sort of drapes across this three-dimensional landscape. And when we did that for this region, what was very clear was that there was this large area of about 100,000 hectares that was almost pinched off by deforestation creeping up two valleys, one coming in from the north, one coming in from the south. And we didn't want that area of forest to become isolated. And we knew that to stop that, we needed to work with Luis and his team to acquire those properties in the valleys, make sure that the deforestation didn't continue, and then when we were able to begin to reforest those areas. So we're very close to having finished that first objective of acquiring the land in these valleys. And Louise is busily planting lots of trees. And when we've done that, we will have reconnected this patch of isolated patch of forest. And the scale is important. We know from our science that an area of 100,000 hectares is not really big enough. It's close, but it's not big enough to support viable populations of cats like the puma and the ocelot. For those we need, and some of the bigger birds, we need bigger patches. We want to be able to connect this area of forest to the main montane forests in the Andes. So all that is very highly focused tactical mapping that identifies exactly which properties that we want to get and reforest.
So you're speaking of these 100,000 hectares, then this corridor, which currently has 3,500, and then the bigger area. So how big is the other area?
I don't know, but it's essentially a large chunk of the western Andes. It goes a long way to the north, a long way to the south. I've never actually measured that, but it's big enough to be a viable area. So we want to prevent areas from being broken off, separated from the main Andes. There's another concern too, that with global climate disruption, we know that species are being moved to higher elevations. Studies that I've done with my colleagues in Peru, show that species over 40 years are 100 meters higher in mountains than they were in the past. So we want to make sure that species can get to higher elevations, and they can't typically if there are cattle pastures in the way. So particularly in this age of climate disruption, we want to make sure that species have freedom to roam.
And when you're working in this corridor, you are buying these plots of land and restoring them. Stuart, you also mentioned in the beginning that sometimes you can let the land restore itself, but sometimes not. So what determines it? Like, why do you sometimes go for natural restoration, and why sometimes you go and dig holes and plant the trees?
It's a complicated story, but where the forest has been cleared relatively recently, there is a good chance that some species will come back on their own. We still may need to dig holes and plant other species so we can bring a diverse forest back. That's broadly the case in the area we're working in with Louise. On the other hand, we're doing projects in coastal Brazil where the forest was cleared 50, 60 years ago. It was cleared to plant coffee. The coffee exhausted the soils. The soils were too bad to grow coffee, so they brought in cattle, and the cattle further degraded the soil. You now have a thick sward of introduced African grasses. There, it's a very difficult job to plant trees. Well, any fool can plant trees. The question is whether you can get the trees to grow up enough that eventually they shade out the invasive grasses underneath. So some places require a lot of effort and a lot of care. In other places, we're lucky in terms of the restorations needed.
Here at La Mesenia, what we have noticed is there are some pioneer trees that start coming back. But also, if the forest, let's say, if a plot of land that is degraded is close enough where birds can fly across, then they'll start dispersing seeds. In other areas, it will be harder, and that's when we put more trees. And then, like Stuart was mentioning, we do enrichment. So is putting a lot of other trees in there, especially fruiting trees that are going to attract the fauna back. So that's what we're right now doing a lot at La Mesenia, is planting trees to attract fauna that we know they're going to be dispersing even more seeds. So that's really interesting, and the soil is so fertile that the forests come back quite quickly. I mean, I would say very fast.
I was asking this question because I read several articles. One was on Yale and Yale E360, and another one on Monga Bay, and they were analyzing reforestation initiatives all around the world. Basically, there are many reforestation initiatives where it's just about the numbers, like let's plant 5 billion trees in 2 years, and then nobody cares what type of trees they are or whether anyone will take care of them. So it's what is very important is to plant the right trees in right places, right?
Exactly so, and we're very concerned about that at Saving Nature. You know, there are people saying, oh, we're going to plant 1 trillion trees. Well, 1 trillion trees is a billion hectares, and there aren't 1 billion hectares onto which to plant trees. So many of these projects don't have the places to put the trees if they had them. And by trees, they mean any kind of tree, like eucalyptus trees. Eucalyptus are wonderful in Australia, but they don't belong anywhere else. And then people plant trees and then get the money for it and then just walk away. So we are very concerned at Saving Nature to partner with groups like Louise's to ensure that we do this tree planting right. It wants to be the right kinds of trees, the right species, a diversity of species, and do it in the right places for maximum impact for biodiversity.
Thank you. And Luis, can you describe a little bit the process of what happens after you acquire the land?
Okay, so let's say that after we acquire the land, what we like to do in some areas is, like, let's say, build a trail, explore what is in there, because obviously the more we explore, the more species we find, and the more interesting things we're able to well describe. And let's say the pasture lands, we do not plant anything right away. We need to allow them to, let's say, oxygenate. We need to allow some of the grasses to start coming up so that they can provide the shade for the trees we're going to plant. There, again, as I mentioned, there's pioneer species that are coming back, and therefore we allow the smaller trees to start doing it by themselves. And then, let's say 2, 3 years later, we go in and we start doing what we're doing now, which is plant trees. Some areas that remained untouched, but like we knew that they were close, the forests were close enough for them to have a good biodiversity being done by themselves, by the like Stuart was mentioning, there could be seeds already in the ground. They were not extremely degraded. Other animals could go right through there and disperse seeds. So that's what we can in at La Mesenia you can witness every single example of what it means to reforest or self-restoring and such, and it's been already 12 years, so you can see very good examples of what can be done in these areas. And so we also learn with smaller areas so that we can apply that to larger areas. The knowledge that our park rangers have, just as an example, we are collecting seeds right now of a tree, a very important tree, because it was used for wood, and so it was cut down extensively in the area. And this tree actually, the bats, once the seeds are ripe, the bats take the seeds, fly to another tree where they perch, they eat the outside crust, then they drop the seeds. That's where we collect them. So we don't collect. Some people will go and collect the seeds on the same tree, and that's a big mistake. You're going to lose a lot of seeds because bats identify when the seed is ripe and when it is ready to be collected. So we get help from those animals, and that knowledge is only known by the people that live around and they observe. That's the amazing thing. They have so much knowledge, and when you see how they do it, you actually say, "Wow, I thought this was done this other way." Or you would do this way, and they're like, no, you have to prepare the seed. The seed has to be actually placed on the bag in a right form so that the root goes in the right direction. So it's unbelievable watching how much knowledge they have on that.
We've had these experiences everywhere we've worked at Saving Nature, that it's the local community, often the local women, who have all this extraordinary knowledge. It's not like, when I want to plant, herbs and flowers in my garden here in North Carolina, and I go to a store and I buy the plants. That's not applicable here. You've got to have people who've got this extraordinary local knowledge of that comes from lifetimes, maybe generations of knowledge about where species grow, which species grow here, which species grow there, which species are dispersed by birds or tapirs or bats, whatever. You've got to have that local knowledge to get the diversity of trees back.
And it would be such a pity to lose this knowledge, right? So it's really nice that you're not trying to chase the people away, but let them stay in the place and also enjoy the benefits of restoring this area. Luis, you talked in the beginning a little bit about how the area looks now, how it has become richer, and so. Can you say more concretely, like what has changed for better since you have come? Like how did it look back then and how it looks now?
So one of the things when we came in, you notice, for example, the first thing that you notice is how the houses are not pretty. The attitude of the people, it's like, again, low energy, little or poor outlook to the future. the school, with no teacher, and in the ways like you get a village that is getting old. Then we got here, we built and started the project. We hired people. We started explaining to them what we were doing because in the beginning, because of all the violence they had lived, they were very afraid of what we were going to do. I mean, what are these people looking for? Are they looking for gold? Are they just want to buy this and everybody's gets away? Or we start putting signs of prohibition to do this or that. And we started sort of telling them what we're doing. We started getting involved with the little kids in the school. We decided that we needed to rebuild the school. We needed to have a teacher here and help them. Like, we donated computers, we donated books. Infrastructure wise, we installed septic tanks. I mean, and again, we want people to live not only with dignity but also under certain healthy conditions. So the more we did things without saying, without boasting about it, like, we did this, we did this. No, we gave the community the credit they reserve. So when we build, let's say we build a small bridge for them to pass over the river safely instead of a piece of log. And we said this was built by the Messenia community, even though we put all the money and everything, we don't care. They put all the hands into it. And then the other thing is this was an isolated community for over 40 years. There were no roads. There was just a trail where everybody had to go out with mules or walking. And the thing with the community was the following, is that the San Juan Antioquia River transverses the Messenia community. And therefore, on one side, you have the Jardín municipality, on the other one, the Andes municipality. So the mayors of both municipalities would always say, oh, no, the Messenia is yours. The other one, oh, no, the Messenia is yours. Only when election time came, they would be interested in the votes of the people from La Messenia. So all the excuses of building a road, I finally said, wait a second, we can build it ourselves. We're going to pay the salaries for everyone that wants to work on the road project. I bought some equipment, one of these jackhammers that worked with a power plant, and with picks and shovels, we started hitting the rocks and everything and building this 5-kilometer road. And 3 months later, we had a road, and now we connected the Messenia community with the town. That changed everything in this area, everything, because now people could take whatever they produce to town. They could go into town if they had an emergency. They could get help. People could come and visit, and therefore that, I think, really made a huge difference in us becoming part of the community. Because I think at the beginning they thought is like, okay, the reserve is there, Hummingbird Conservancy is there, but we are La Messenia. So they did not consider us part of the community. After we did all this, now we feel that we are definitely part of the community. Every December we celebrate, we bring them a small presents, or we buy, let's say, the food that we want to share with them, and have a small meeting with everyone and things like that. We definitely are we like to. And I mean, I think for example, in the case of my wife, she's very social, so she really cares. Not, I mean, I care, but she is more. She goes into the house of everybody. What do you need? Oh, we don't have a how do you call that? Maybe a small stove, or we have to give them things to cook, or even a bed. People, they have basic needs, and we help doing them with that, or putting septic tanks to avoid the contamination of the river. All those small things, which are really not expensive at all, but that for them is highly appreciated, because these people basically, I think that where they were pointed at. It's like, oh no, those guys are a bunch of guerrilla. Nobody really trusted them. I think that we have rebuilt the trust, and I think that now there's a different expectation. Now, let's say that 10 years after you're here, even Uriel with his stories, when you hear the stories that now they tell you, because at the beginning there's not not only the trust, but I think also the empathy where you hear when he, for example, Uriel was telling me stories where he said, look, the guerrilla would knock on my door and tell me, you have to carry, we have a lot of people that have been shot, you have to carry them uphill. And he would go out of his home and say, I don't know if I'm going to return. And his sons and daughters will say that. We say, well, my dad would go out, we would hide under the beds, and we wouldn't know if he was going to come back. And we would cry all night. And so when you hear those type of stories, when life and death is just, or death is just, the next day or whatever, really you don't have much outlook on life. But now I think when you see this, it's like, wow, I can't believe this, because if you don't live it, you really cannot have the, you would say, wow, I cannot even imagine living through that. And no, so everybody has their own story, but these are like horror stories. So now again, I think our project has brought I think the most important thing, because yeah, we're protecting nature, but I think the people, the villagers that are going to be the ones that in the future, who knows, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, they will be the ones to benefit from all that we're doing. And I think that's probably the most important thing of any conservation project.
One of the most important lessons that I've learned in my career is that all conservation is local. That you cannot do conservation inside your air-conditioned office, inside the Washington D.C. Beltway, or within the city of London or New York or wherever. You've got to get out there, and you have to empower local communities. It has to make a difference to local communities. If it doesn't make a difference to them, it's not going to work. So all the projects that we do with Saving Nature involve, working with our partners, empowering them, allowing them, helping them, encouraging them, funding them, to have these local engagements. And that's what works, and that's what gives the projects a longevity. The international conservation landscape is littered with projects where people have gone in with a ton of Western money, gone in for 3 years, dumped a huge amount of money in the community and left, and then everything has gone, if not back to the way it was, in some cases worse to the way it was. You've got to get these local communities developed, and that's what Louise is doing so brilliantly at La Mazzania.
And Stuart, when you're saying that conservation should be local, what about big global problems like climate change or desertification or biodiversity loss? Because one thing that I'm so fascinated by is that I follow so many environmental media, and there are so few, or outlets, and there are so few of them who talk about wildlife conservation. It's just all about climate change. It's like there is no other issue currently than climate change. And so it's just like these very vague articles about, I don't know, Biden administration and renewable energies and these kinds of things. But people can't participate in these projects. It's all just like, okay, you read the article, fine, something is happening somewhere, but I don't have a way to change anything. So this is something,
and that's bad, and it's worse. It's bad in the sense that you become discouraged. I don't know what actions I can take. What is it I can do to make a difference? And it's worse, and it doesn't encourage people to invest in actions where you can see the consequences. You put your money into something and you have no idea where it goes, and therefore you come out at the end having no sense that you've made a difference. We may be small at Saving Nature, but you can go to our website, you can go to Google Earth, You can look at the places where we're working and you can see the difference that we've made. You can see what we've done from space. You can see what we've done on the ground too. But I think it's vitally important to tell people that they can make a difference. And those actions are significant in terms of developing local communities. They're significant in terms of offsetting carbon emissions. We are planting, or our partners are planting, millions of trees in various parts of the world. That's a lot of carbon that we're sequestering. And because we're doing it in a smart way, we are reconnecting fragmented landscapes and making a very big difference to the loss of biodiversity. I want people to look at what we've done and feel encouraged, feel that there are things that we can do, there are things that they can do.
And so, can you say one simple thing that anyone can do to help protect nature? One thing.
Well, other than please support us at Saving Nature, you know, I think the fundamental thing is that there are a lot of things that we can do. There's a lot of organizations to support, particularly local ones like Louisa's. But I think I would want people to have the message, yes, there are things that we can do, and yes, there are things that we can do where we can see what we do. This sense of we can make a difference, whether it's, you know, eating sustainably harvested fish, whether it's driving less in your car. You know, there's a lot of small things that we can do on a day-to-day basis that make a difference, and we should feel proud that we can do that.
Thank you. And what about you, Luis? Do you have any message?
Yeah, I think that everything adds up. I think that if somebody starts being conscious about every single activity that one does, is just adding simple little things. I mean, it doesn't require that, oh no, from today on I'm not going to be able to do that, because myself, you know, when you go back to Cali and say, oh, let's separate the trash, let's recycle, but then the people that pick up the garbage do not recycle. So you're like, oh, everything that I've here, my effort is not really working. Where can I do this effort? How can I teach every single one? Like we have now a small sort of it's called let's see, Natural World, and it's this booklet that we are printing for the small kids for the school to make them conscious about the biodiversity, to make them conscious about the importance of having clean water, to make them conscious about the importance of recycling, to make them conscious about eating clean food or being able to also, you know, plant your own food. I mean, even if you do a small little garden in your backyard. Now here at La Mesenia, my wife wanted to bring like foreign plants, and I'm fighting with her and telling her, no, I don't want any foreign plants here. This is our reserve. It's not allowed. And now the use of her baskets, where she wanted to see flowers, we're actually growing vegetables. So we're growing our lettuce. And now when she sees it now, that she's like, oh, this is so beautiful. Now, okay, we're going to plant anything that you're going to use to condiment the food. Everything is going to be organic. So little small things that actually make you conscious every day, that you are putting your little grain of sand. I say, okay, what is this La Mesenia? Okay, so it's my little grain of sand to the world. And that's fine. I mean, you know, that's all that you want to leave as a legacy, is that at least you try to contribute something to making the world better. It's hard. It's a hard battle. We know it. But if you don't start, I was like, I want to plant a tree. When was the best time to plant a tree? Well, 20 years ago. Well, plant it now, you know.
Well, you're both making a great contribution. I wouldn't say it's a grain of sand. It's a big contribution. So I want to thank you so much for doing this. It's really amazing work, and I love to talk to such inspiring people like you. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica.
Absolutely my pleasure.
If you'd like to hear more about Saving Nature's work, go to savingnature.com and check their Facebook page, Saving Nature, And if you'd like to learn more about the Hummingbird Conservancy, visit hummingbirdconservancy.org. And if you speak Spanish, check their Facebook page Reserva Natural Mecenía Paramillo. Thank you very much for listening. If you'd like to hear more episodes like these, subscribe to Nature Solutionaries podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Stitcher. Talk to you next time.